Good Monday afternoon to you, 4 o'clock in time for Sports4CLE. Thanks for joining us. Hope you had a great weekend. Browns back to training camp out in Berea, practicing outside as scheduled. The theme of the day, Superheroes Day, kind of aimed at the young fans. DeShaun Watson taking the field, giving the young fans some excitement, and Juan Thornhill there as well. Watson, a good day in the red zone. Here he finds Elijah Moore. An easy pitch and catch this time. Back of the end zone, over the middle, a nice grab by Dawand Jones. Dorian Thompson-Robinson scrambles. He finds Anthony Schwartz. He holds on to it for a red zone touchdown. This time, Nick Chubb, nice little run, easy. Fans out in Berea liked that one. Sione Takitaki back in team drills, and this time he intercepts DTR in a red zone. This is concerning. Late in the practice, Jerome Ford, running back 2, hobbles off with an apparent right leg injury. Also, some other news from training camp. Scott Petrak tweets out, Drew Forbes forced to leave practice, a back injury. Then we also find out that Alex Wright and Isaiah Thomas, two of the young edge guys, will miss significant time with knee injuries suffered the past few days, likely to go into the regular season. Browns signed a young defensive end, Charles Wiley, in the wake of those injuries. Also, some former Brown news. John Johnson III back to where he started, signing a one-year deal with the Rams. That's according to Jeremy Fowler. Also, according to Jeremy Fowler, Kareem Hunt. Remember him making a free agent visit with the Saints. Remember, Kamara will miss 3 games. Eno Benjamin, also a backup running back, got hurt there. But Hunt in New Orleans for that visit starting tonight. With that, let's welcome in Jeff Lloyd from the Locked On Browns podcast. Jeff, a lot to digest there. Let's start with the ends. Wright and Thomas were guys that the Browns thought they may be able to kick inside as well. Do you see them needing a veteran tackle on the defensive side of the ball more so than before?
Well, we always felt they needed the veteran defensive tackle. You know, Shelby Harris was a name to band about. Another name that I've been trying to talk about for a while now that I thought would really be a good fit here, because he could probably play end and he can play inside, is Matt Ioannidis, former Carolina Panther, former Washington Commander out of Temple University. And this is really where it's going to get tricky, because, you know, how are the Browns going to work these preseason games? You're not, you know, if your plan was to not play Myles Garrett now because guys are going down, you're not going to say, oh, well, we have to play Myles, because, you know, you're not going to do that. So, I mean, they're going to be really light here for guys that are going to get, you know, reps within the remaining preseason games they have. Going into the regular season, you figure with, you know, Isaiah McGuire, and then obviously Obo, and then obviously, you know, Zadarius and Miles. I mean, you're okay for a week or two, but you certainly want depth. But the question is, how do you manufacture the next month until you get to week 1? So it's, you know, obviously a little bit of a difficult spot right now for this team. But look, at the grand scheme of things, you'd rather, you know, these injuries probably happen, you know, August 5th, 6th, and 7th than August 25th, 26th, or 27th. And
again, we don't know the severity of them. You just, anytime somebody leaves a practice like that, you're concerned. Ford, that's another guy. If that is a weeks as opposed to days injury, you probably got to think about bringing in a veteran running back, don't you?
Well, I mean, these were conversations we were having already. And then, you know, over the past few days, you know, obviously some of the offensive coaching staff spoke up a little bit and kind of, you know, put a little praise on Jerome Ford's plate and basically said the things that nobody had said previous, which is kind of why we were all wondering, are they going to go the veteran running back or they're not? And then they tried to say that basically they felt, you know, that they were kind of comfortable with what they thought Jerome Ford can give them. Well, now obviously we don't know what Jerome Ford can give us, and we don't know when Jerome Ford can give it to us. So obviously a really tough year. I mean, a really tough break for, you know, the second-year player who seemed to have a lot of promise. Everybody got excited about him last summer. Didn't really have a role for him during the season. But now here you are in this, you know, weird situation now. And, you know, all we know it's at this point, I mean, right leg injury. So obviously it could be anything from quad to calf to hamstring to knee to ankle. You know, we'll wait till we hear more on it. But, you know, tough spot, you know, for a kid who obviously they felt has some promise. You know, the backs who played Thursday night, I'm not saying that they didn't perform well and they didn't look good. But, when you start talking about guys that were battling out for maybe the third or fourth running back spot on the roster, all of a sudden now we're talking about these same guys to be playing the number 2 running back. And you don't want to put such a heavy load on Nick Chubb because the thought process is 17 regular season games and then hopefully games into January as well. So, yeah, I mean, it's not really ideal right now. Every team goes through it as we know it. But, again, still, not the best hand to be dealt at this point in training camp for the Cleveland Browns.
Well, one of the performances that people were talking about, Dawand Jones in that Hall of Fame game, played all the snaps, didn't allow a pressure. Take a listen to what former NFL offensive lineman Brian Baldinger sees when he breaks down what Dawand Jones did.
Let's drop in on Big Thanos. Dawand Jones here. Played every snap on Thursday night. Look at his hands and his feet. It's like right out of Joe Thomas's playbook against an elite rusher in Bryce Huff. Bam! All right, just swallows him up. All right, now, let's watch him here against the Jets' number 1 pick, Will McDonald. One-on-one with the Jets' number 1 pick. Short set. There's the punch and a snap. Snaps that head. Likes to almost aim for the neck. This is Cleveland Brown football right here. Here's Gossett at right guard. Luke Whippler at the center. Watch this here. This is what it's supposed to look like. Bam! There's the punch. Here comes Gossett. Bam! Just look at the victim right there. That's Cleveland Brown football. And then you get the game-winning throw from Dorian Thompson-Robinson, right? Here it is. Watch the set on Bryce Huff. Bam. There's that consistent set. Consistent. Bam. Punch. This is a great pass rusher off the edge. Look at the length that he has. Look at the length. Look at the separation. He's on an island so that the quarterback can make this throw for the game winner. Had to be impressed by Big Thanos.
And, Jeff, the reason we do that, an offensive lineman is going to take you through some different things, all of which sounds pretty good from the rookie. Now, again, it's not against guys that are going to be regulars, but it's a good start.
Well, Bryce Huff had 3.5 sacks for the New York Jets last year. Jermaine Johnson was the first-round pick 2 years ago. Will McDonald was the first-round pick last year. So it was against guys that are going to make this New York Jets roster. I think the thing that was really impressive is he knew he had a lot of pressure on him coming into this. He knew. Everybody felt the potential was there, even though this guy was drafted in the fourth round. The potential was there that this guy should be a starting tackle in the NFL one day. Then there were, questions, about, and I give Dawand credit for this because the worst thing you can do at any time during your draft cycle is try to cover up something and say, oh, well, that did it. Look, he said he was a big basketball fan growing up. But obviously, 350 pounds doesn't translate to, the hardwood in NCAA or obviously the NBA. So, for him to, make it in sports, it's going to be as an offensive lineman. It's going to be as an offensive tackle. You've got a guy who has, worked wonders with NFL, offensive linemen over the years, and Bill Callahan. It seemed kind of like a dream scenario, giving, this great teacher, this, great student who basically needed, the light to be, the lamp to be relit a little bit. And look, he played at Ohio State. He played with the top countries in America, so it's not like he's not a good player. And I think there's also more of, hey, son, would you like to make $50 million? Because if you listen to me and you do what I tell you to do, you should probably walk out of this league one day with your total earnings somewhere around $50 million. But, yeah, it was crazy impressive. And now will be the next step. The next step will be, can we maybe do it on the other side? Because if the Browns can find a way next year, if he could possibly contend for that left tackle spot, and maybe they can find a way to shed $14 million if they choose to possibly move on from Jedrick Wills, that is something that could really, really help this team financially.
Jeff Lloyd from the Locked On Browns podcast and I are going to step aside, take a quick time out. Other side of the break, how good should we expect DeShaun Watson to be? Sports4CLE will be right back. Stay with us. The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education program recognizes role model students and teachers from across Ohio. Nominations can now be done completely online. To nominate a deserving teacher or student, go to ohiolottery.com. In the About section, find Partners in Education. There you will find links to the nomination forms. Students kindergarten through 12th grade can be academic all-stars. Teachers can be honored as a Teacher of the Month. The Ohio Lottery, partners in education, where stars shine.
The Greater Cleveland Sports Hall of Fame celebrates the star athletes and notable sports figures who were born or have made their home in Greater Cleveland. It tells the story of discipline, commitment, perseverance, sportsmanship, and excellence in achievement. It encourages and inspires those who believe in sport and its direct impact on the well-being of our community. Go to clevelandsportshall.com or follow us on Twitter at GCLE Sports HOF for more details.
We continue talking Browns here on Sports4CLE. So Colin Cowherd with The Herd with Colin Cowherd, talking about his thoughts about DeShaun Watson for this season.
I'm not a big believer in DeShaun Watson. He's got terrible judgment. I don't know if he's a leader. But I say this, the NBA has certain players that they're wow players, like Zach LaVine's the guy I use, highlight guys, but I never trust them in big spots. Don't necessarily make their teammates better. DeShaun Watson was 4-12 in Houston his last year starting down there and had great stats and won 4 games in that division. So if you go to his NFL career, he dominates mediocre teams, and he's 7-18 against playoff teams. And that's how I've always felt about him. He's just bad or mediocre in the biggest spots that I need him. But he tears up average, tears it up. So, he's got like one of the great passer ratings in league history. So he's obviously talented, and I feel I get a lot of wow highlights out of him. And I mean, there's every argument to make that Cleveland is very well constructed. They got a smart GM. They got a number 1 corner, a great pass rusher, a number 1 receiver, a good O-line, a dynamic quarterback. They should be absolutely very, very good. I've just never I don't feel the same. Like Lamar Jackson, I feel like is totally focused on football, injury stuff, but I think in big spots he's been very good. Joe Burrow, obviously, in big spots has been very good. I just don't feel the same with DeShaun Watson.
Well, this is DeShaun Watson's career. So he was 3-3 as a rookie when he started 6 games. 11-5 his second year, then with the playoffs. 10-5, he did miss a game. So he's got 2 10-win seasons out of 3. Now, when you look at that 4-12, his wide receiving core was Brandon Cooks, Randall Cobb, Fuller, Akins, David Johnson was his main back. He had J.J. Watt and Whitney Marcellus on the defensive line. Other than that, you look at that roster, you're not going to know too many people. So he put up the big numbers with a team that had 4-win talent. And I love the NBA reference, Jeff, because this is the guy that thought that Ben Simmons was going to be the face of the NBA a few years back. He told LeBron he could go, that we were good with Ben Simmons. But I get the thing with the 4 wins, but he has 2 10-plus win seasons as a starting quarterback out of 3 that he's played most of the games in.
Well, first off, where of any of DeShaun Watson's time down in Houston did you say, oh, man, there was the big game? There was the big game. They were never in a big game. And the other thing is overglossing the fact that season where the team went 4-12, we all know what the national story was. What was the national story? The season ended. J.J. Watt went up to DeShaun Watson, and on behalf of the other 52 members of that roster, apologized to him. That none of them could play on the level that he played that season. So, you can find a way, and, I've talked with people, and I know people who put together, the way Colin likes to work, the way Colin likes to do his work. And basically Colin says, this is the narrative I want to drive. You need to find me some statistical influence somehow, some way to sort of back it up. And the other thing is you talked about all that stuff on the Browns. And the one thing you didn't mention was probably their overall most important player, who is the running back Nick Chubb. So look, you can find a way to, you work hard enough. You have enough people do research, Dave, they could find a way to get us out of here in a heartbeat if they wanted to. But look, it's a whole different ballgame. It's a whole different team. And why would you believe, if the roster has been upgraded as much as it has, that, all of a sudden the quarterback is not worthy? The reason they spent all this money is to basically back up the investment they made in the quarterback. feeling that did not have enough around him. And even if he is not in that 2020 form anymore, guess what? We put a roster around him here for 2023 that is light years better than the roster he played with in 2020. So basically, we hedged our bet on DeShaun Watson by making sure it was almost kind of like, basically, fail-proof.
Yeah, and again, I get it. And there's always a shred of truth in what Colin says, which is why you kind of go in and you look a little deeper and you look a little deeper. So,
and to be fair, the AFC South was very mediocre.
Right.
Of course,
absolutely.
It's a lot different now. Where Jacksonville was a playoff team last year, where Tennessee has been a playoff team for the last couple of seasons. But
all right.
Sometimes people are gonna zig when people want to zag.
That's fine. Yeah, and again, he gets attention, got my attention, so I get it. This is from NFL.com. They are ranking the top 10 quarterbacks entering the 2023 season. Patrick Mahomes, number 1. Joe Burrow, number 2. Josh Allen, 3. Jalen Hurts, 4. Lamar Jackson, 5. Justin Herbert, 6. And Deshaun Watson checks in at number 7. This group has sneaky promise due to sheer talent and Watson's ability to make plays outside the pocket. I expect we'll see a much different Watson in 2023 than the one we saw a year ago, is the rationale by NFL.com. They had Lawrence 8, Aaron Rodgers 9, Dak Prescott 10. Of all the quarterback rankings that we've seen, Jeff, and we've done a ton of them, this one seems pretty legit to me. I think that's very fair.
Well, for me, one of my biggest takeaways from Thursday night and watching rookie quarterback Dorian Thompson-Robinson play was, wow. I can't wait to see DeShaun Watson and Amari Cooper, Elijah Moore, and Donovan Peoples-Jones. Because obviously the offense and the way they are, changing it, upgrading it, making it more, quarterback driven as opposed to running back driven, the way this offense has been the last couple of seasons. That was the takeaway I had is, this rookie looked great in his first action in the NFL. So, my God, I can't wait to see what DeShaun looks like. And look, every day, overall, we talk about, the defense seems to be, catching up and getting some wins here. But every day we can go through and we can find highlights. And, not enough talked about Elijah Moore because, Elijah Moore gives you a highlight, if not 1, 2, every single day. Donovan just kind of goes about his thing. He's kind of like Novocaine, smooth there every day, does his job. Amari Cooper's rounding back into what will be game shape. And then there's David Njoku. Then there is Akins. Then there still is Nick Chubb. This offense should perform, and it should perform very, very well. And if it doesn't, that's going to be the issue. But the expectation is that this offense is going to get a ton of yards and it's going to score a lot of points.
So you mentioned Amari Cooper coming back from that core muscle injury. This is from the Game Day NFL. Most receiving yards in the NFL since 2018. Devontae Adams, number 1 with 6,800 plus yards. Tyreek Hill, 6,500 plus is 2. Kelsey, almost 6,500 is 3. Amari Cooper, 8th most since 2018, over 5,500 yards. I've said it a couple of times. I think people are underestimating and underrating Amari Cooper because he's not a guy that sits there and tells everybody how great he is as a wide receiver.
He is the equivalent to what Nick Chubb is at running back. You just don't get much out of him. And it makes certainly a pleasure to cover. Certainly makes him a pleasure to watch. And I think one thing you have to talk about when you're talking about it with Amari is that it's already been over 3 stops. So, it's getting acclimated to a new offensive system. It's getting acclimated to a new quarterback. And, last year it was not getting acclimated to one quarterback. It was getting acclimated to 2 quarterbacks for 1 season. So, the guy has been through a lot, and still to be able to put out and put up that type of production year in, year out. The Browns are, certainly pleased with him. Maybe a little bit of his production comes off this year. We'll see, though, because there is going to be just a general overall uptick in passing yards, I think, anyway. So maybe he still gives you the same statistical production. But, you have Donovan, you have Elijah Moore. I think this offense is not going to force anything to anybody. It's going to find the open guy, and that's who's going to get the ball. And we'll see, maybe early in the season, the coverage is going to be a little tighter on Amari Cooper until people see that Elijah Moore can do it on a more consistent basis than the regular season basis. To see that Donovan Peoples-Jones can have a little bit more success with Deshaun Watson than he did last year with Jacoby Brissett. But no, I mean, Amari Cooper, it's just quiet and goes about his business. Unlike most wide receivers, he's usually he's just a quiet player on the field. I don't mean that about his play, but he's, not the guy that's, celebrating every reception. He's not screaming for a flag because, somehow, some way he didn't catch a pass. Just goes about his business, smooth, silky, quiet. And, I think for a team that's had a lot of, loudness out of players where they never had the production, I think the fact that they're getting a little bit of white noise now at some skill player positions is probably something they are truly, truly enjoying.
Well, running back coach Stump Mitchell talked about Nick Chubb's role in this offense in the running game, as well as Jerome Ford's progress. Again, this was before Jerome Ford went down late in practice with that right knee or right leg injury. But here's Stump Mitchell.
I would say just an understanding of the offense, to improve as a person in terms of being a better teammate. And also, we know what he did with special teams in terms of kickoffs. Hopefully, he'll still have an opportunity to do that and prove he can be even better at it.
You think he can catch the ball out of the backfield? You've seen enough of that. We haven't seen it in games. Jerome.
Well, absolutely. All the backs can catch the ball out of the backfield. You haven't seen as much from Nick as you have, but you will see more this upcoming season.
What has Nick done to improve in that area? Or was he always good at it and he just never really got the opportunity?
That's exactly right, America. He was always good at it, never got the opportunity. I think Nick may have dropped last year one ball, but he's good in everything that he does, and he always tries to work on all the traits that he does well, and if he's slacking in one, he tried to work to improve in that as well.
Again, Stump Mitchell talking about Jerome Ford and Nick Chubb in that passing game.
Well, this is, what we talk about. I think Nick Chubb's going to catch more passes than he's ever caught. This is a team that's going to throw the ball more often. So I think for Nick, this is going to be the year where he probably breaks his, whatever his career high is in receptions. It's just going to be a team that throws the ball more. Plus, it's going to take, it's going to take some hits off of his body. It's another way to get him to contribute within this offense. And, from forward, look, I mean, it's just tough. Obviously, we're in this weird situation now. Where we're just, basically handed this new information. We have no timetable. We don't even know what exactly his ailment is to this point. So that certainly clouds anything we could, say as far as, where we are with Jerome Ford. But there are guys in this roster, and you saw, Demetric Felton catch passes Thursday night. You saw John Kelly catch passes Thursday night. You have an understanding that, maybe there won't be as many run calls. But there still will be, the elongated handoffs, where you're trying to hit him in the flat real quick. Or obviously you're running screens, which, Kevin Stefanski, I don't think any of that's going to change. He's always loved the screen game. I don't think he's going to go away from the screen game. And with the offensive line he has, I certainly wouldn't go away from the screen game. But yeah, you're going to have expectations that your running backs can be able to contribute as receivers. And the other thought process there is, sometimes for these guys, if they're not the greatest guys in pass pro as far as running backs, then put them in positions where you're just going to get the ball in their hands.
Jeff Lloyd from the Locked On Browns podcast and I are going to step aside, take a quick time out. Other side of the break, we turn our attention a little bit to the Browns and the AFC North, how things stack up. Sports4CLE, we'll be right back. Stay with us.
Come back to go forward. Back to learning new things. Back to pursuing your dreams. Tri-C has flexible learning options to fit your life. And every year, more than 1,000 local companies provide Tri-C students with real-world learning. The right education can boost your lifetime earning power by hundreds of thousands of dollars. Start now with a college education you can afford. Tri-C, where futures begin.
We continue talking Browns with Jeff Lloyd from the Locked On Browns podcast. This is from the Bleacher Report. They predicted every NFL's division standings for 2023. For the AFC North, they had the Bengals at 12-5 winning the division. They have the Ravens finishing second, a game behind at 11-6. Steelers, they say, are going to be above 500 again, 9-8, finishing third. And they have the Browns, same record as a year ago, 7-10. The rationale, every year about this time, there are predictions that this will be the year that the Browns put things together and make the postseason run. DeShaun Watson looked awfully good, looked mostly awful in limited action last year. and it's the Browns. Something is going to go wrong. Jeff, I think you and I have talked about this. That's
analysis. I mean, man, there's some analysis for you, right?
It's lazy.
You know what I'm saying?
It's lazy.
It's
incredibly lazy.
You're not going to talk about the fact that they added not one but two defensive ends, not one but two safeties. Added one of the best tackles on the free agent market at defensive tackles. Brought in a player like Elijah Moore. And with the way that trade worked out, brought in another wide receiver in Cedric Tillman. You brought in yet another athletic tight end. You brought back the center who was fantastic for you last year that just came kind of on out of nowhere. I mean, you just can't write words and hit send. I mean, stuff like it's just frustrating. It really is. You know, there's not one thing there other than the fact that you thought he looked awful. And yeah, there were times he looked awful last year. Absolutely. You know, yeah. And, you know, part of it, well, he played it, Christmas Eve. It was, -15 in Cleveland? He didn't have a great game. Stunner. Absolutely blows my mind that a guy could not find a way to throw a football successfully in -15-degree weather about 3 miles from a lake. That is, I mean, come on. It's Cleveland. Something's going to happen.
All right.
There you go, man. I mean, we talked about this last week, and I guess somebody decided that, top shop analysis. You know what I'm saying?
All right. So to back that up, I thought this would be interesting. So this is from ESPN.com. Biggest position battles for all 32 teams. So for the Browns, they're looking at the number 4 wide receiver. Cedric Tillman, Jakeem Grant coming back from Achilles surgery, David Bell, Anthony Schwartz, Jalen Darden are among those vying for the spot. So that's the most intriguing battle, according to ESPN. For the Ravens, they're talking about their starting left guard. For the Bengals, their starting right tackle. For the Steelers, their starting left tackle. So when you do this analysis and you're talking about position battles, and the biggest position battle you got for a team is their number 4 wide receiver, and everybody else in the division you're worried about a starting offensive lineman. I'm not sure how that equates to being under 500 and 7-10. There's an imbalance there.
Well, let's see. For Pittsburgh, their number 1 question is the guy who's responsible for Myles Garrett. Okay. So Cincinnati, their biggest question mark is the guy who could be responsible for Myles Garrett, or Zadarius Smith, or Ogmenaya Okoronkwo. For the Ravens, their biggest question mark could be the guy who's responsible for Dalvin Tomlinson, or God forbid, Siani Ika, who's 350, and 2 guys could not move him off his spot in a short yardage situation Thursday night in the Hall of Fame game. Look, I get it, and there's so much dead period, and content still has to be produced. You have to satisfy advertisers. You have to satisfy the people who are paying you. But now's the guys, we've got footage. We've got things to talk about. We have things to go off of. We're off of cruise control content mode. It's time to start putting legitimate stuff back out there, as opposed to the fact is Cleveland, something will always happen.
All right. Before we go to break, this is from NFL Network's Good Morning Football. Kyle Brandt on the biggest obstacle to the Bengals in the AFC North.
There's a dirty little secret about the Joe Burrow Bengals that doesn't get talked about because it's beneath the radar. The Joe Burrow, Zach Taylor Bengals have really struggled against the Browns. Really struggled. Joe Burrow's 1-4 against Cleveland. Against Cleveland. These have not been great Cleveland teams. Last 2 years, his worst defeats, Burrow as a starter, have both been to Cleveland. They've rolled it up on him. The Bengals defense has been terrible. Burrow hasn't been able to get the win. And it's a combination of, we haven't talked about Cleveland much for the past year for a lot of different reasons, versus you're so distracted by Lamar and Pittsburgh, the Steelers logo, that you don't really the Browns, they've tuned up the Bengals a few times. Stefanski's completely unafraid of that team. Apparently Myles Garrett's completely unafraid of them. And this is just into the Cleveland thing more. When it comes time to pick the playoff teams, there's going to be so many Cincinnati, so many Baltimore, I'm sure Pittsburgh, they have no way picking the Browns. They're not going to pick the Browns. They're not going to be picked. Just turn in the games and at least give the Browns credits for when they play Cincinnati. In Cincinnati, in Cleveland, they've messed them up. Joe Burrow, 1-4, doesn't that not shock you? It is a thing that has happened the last few years where, for whatever reason, a lot of it having to do with the Bengals defense, they don't play well against Cleveland. They have to play well against Cleveland. Cleveland's going to be better this year.
Well, Myles Garrett has wrecked that offense most of the time, and it's only going to be more of a challenge for them now because of the style and the talent they've added on that line.
And look, these are, things I have, heard, obviously, they brought in Orlando Brown and, he made Pro Bowl. Orlando Brown made Pro Bowls as a right tackle. So, and Orlando Brown does not have a great history against Myles Garrett. So that's great that you brought him in. Jonah Williams or, Collins, who, you have these two vying for, right tackle. If they were sure on either one of them, they would know who the right tackle was. And, with Jonah Williams, he was a guy a year ago they gave the fifth-year option to, and they thought so much of his 2022 season, they went out and signed Orlando Brown Jr. for a boatload of money, and they think maybe Jonah Williams will be the right tackle. They can't stop Nick Chubb, which has made whatever quarterback plays for the Cleveland Browns look 10 times better than they are on any given day because they can't handle it. And even the DeShaun Watson start last year, if the defensive coaches, and especially the secondary, had realized that, okay, now T. Higgins is off the field, now Tyler Boyd is off the field, maybe we should adjust what we're doing instead of, no, they didn't, and actually tried to tell us that the game became harder because those two players were off the field, and they should have won that game as well. It's not like anything anybody's hiding. Joe Burrow struggles against his team. Yes, he is pretty outstanding against the other 30 teams in the NFL, but he struggles against this Cleveland Browns team. And we'll see if it changes, if it starts to, the gap starts to get a little more narrow and starts to get a little bit closer here as far as the 1-4 record. But right now, that is a serious issue. The Browns have played good football on the offensive side of the ball, and against Joe Burrow, they are 4-1. It's a fact.
Well, and the other thing is, I think Jim Schwartz will figure out a way to make the defense make them pay if T. Higgins and Jamar Chase are. I think he'll take that as an advantage.
Well, his theory is Joe Burrow hopefully is not going to get many throws off. That's exactly what Jim Schwartz is thinking. Well, if this is what you all did before I got here, let's see what we can do now where we have improved talent. The second leading sacker on your team does not have 3 sacks because that will not be the case in 2023.
Jeff Lloyd and I are going to step aside, take a quick time out. Other side of the break, we'll talk a little bit more about Jim Schwartz and this defense. We'll hear from Sione Takitaki. Sports4CLE will be right back. Stay with us. The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education program recognizes role model students and teachers from across Ohio. Nominations can now be done completely online. To nominate a deserving teacher or student, go to ohiolottery.com. In the About section, find Partners in Education. There you will find links to the nomination forms. Students kindergarten through 12th grade can be academic all-stars. Teachers can be honored as a Teacher of the Month. The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education, where stars shine. We continue talking Browns with Jeff Lloyd from the Locked On Browns podcast. Told you earlier that Jerome Ford, running back number 2 for the Browns, left with a right leg injury. We are now finding out that it is a right hamstring injury. That sideline, I'm still no word on the severity of it. But again, hobbled off, and we'll see how that goes. Jeff, when you think about it, again, we just want to find this. It's better than a knee. It's better than this. It's better. Let's find out the severity of it. So the hamstring, no grade yet. We'll find out probably within the next couple of days how serious it is.
Look, either way, I don't think there was a scenario here where any of us were going to be thrilled for the young man. Hamstring, and look, they're a pain, because, if you try to rush it, certainly the re-aggravation, possibility is there. The fact that he wasn't putting any weight on it certainly doesn't help. It certainly, raises, some questions about, and the Browns have had, a veteran running back in or two. It does, create a unnecessary hole that this team really, really does not need right now. Because, I'm sure there's no thoughts on playing Nick Chubb in the preseason, which there shouldn't be. And what we saw Thursday night, I think, the guys were good. Nothing really blew your mind. But there are some veterans out there, and we'll see the way it plays out. And one maybe kind of with some Ohio ties formerly in his career. But the Browns are certainly going to have to maybe nose around here, because they thought, and the way they basically talked about it the last couple of days, is they thought they had a significant upgrade at the running back number 2 position than the guys who played on Thursday night. And now, unfortunately, that running back has gone down today.
All right. Sione Takitaki back in team drills for the first time. They're going to ease him back into it. He talked about playing in this Jim Schwartz defensive system today.
We got a bunch of guys that just play downhill. You guys, have heard about it. Just an attacking style. I feel like the linebacker room, D-line, to all the guys that they brought in, I feel like it fits this style of defense that Schwartz is bringing. They brought in Z, DT, drafted some guys, some big dudes, and so they're going to make our jobs a lot easier. The back 7, and then we got good guys that can cover. So we're going to make it work.
Is it drastically different, or does it? I mean, in the way that it suits you, do you like playing that style to be aggressive and kind of downhill?
Yeah, in high school and college, if I was coming straight out of college, I'd be like, yeah, I want a system like this. But I learned the other system where you got to be a little bit more patient, put a lot more on the linebackers. But I definitely like this style, man. Where they're gonna unhandcuff us and we're gonna just fly around and make plays. So I'm excited.
And that's a recurring theme that you hear from all of these players. Set us free. Let us go run wild. Take the handcuffs off. Those are the kind of things you want to hear from the guys that are on defense.
Well, I mean, to hear any defensive player talk about patience, that's one that just automatically you're like, it just seems so odd, because defense is so reactionary. You see something, you feel something, you go. I mean, it's basically be the hammer, not the nail. And I think that's the biggest thing now for these guys, is they're allowed to just go 100 million miles an hour. And I think we saw it Thursday night. You saw that the linebackers were basically where they needed to be every single time. It wasn't like, all right, well, let's rewind the play. And, oh, there they are with a guard 7 yards past the line of scrimmage. Well, that's not going to work. And granted, even the top linebackers didn't play Thursday night, but you saw where the system is. And look, it's just a different mentality on the defensive side of the ball. Is you basically just want to go, and you want to go 110%, and hopefully that is going to be, look, you're going to lose. Everybody knows you're going to lose downs. But just basically see what basically trust what you see and go 100 million miles an hour. And, it seems to be, like you said, the reoccurring theme here that everybody, and which Jim said, look, I think I have really, really good players, so there's no reason to go super complicated here right now. Maybe I will have to start adding more. But for now, I think my guys might be better than theirs. So let's go out and go head-to-head and see if that is just, in fact, the case. Well,
one guy that knows what this defense is supposed to look like when it's being played well, Rodney McLeod, played in Schwartz's system in Philadelphia. Talked about the Browns and where they're at learning Jim Schwartz's defense.
Right where we need to be. Of course, camp is about continuing to get better each and every day. And guys are obviously locked in. And so things are starting to, come together. More plays are starting to be made. And that has a lot to do with guys now having a more familiarity with the scheme. They're not necessarily thinking about, okay, where do I necessarily have to line up? They're thinking about, okay, what's the offense doing? How do I put myself in position to make plays? And so it's good to see right now at this point in camp.
And Jeff, as he's saying that, there was way too much thinking going on the defensive side of the ball a year ago. That is bad for a defense. React, don't think.
Well, the other thing is, the longer you think, and the problem with this on the defensive side of the ball is you've got to hope that the 10 other guys on the defensive side of the ball are thinking the same way that you are. And if you're not, you obviously get to mass confusion like we saw with the Jets game. Certainly the second Bengals game that we just referenced a little bit earlier. So the longer everybody should know what the initial read is, and here's the read, and this is what I do. And when you talk about thinking longer and patience, well, then it's, it clouds it, and, maybe 11 guys aren't seeing everything exactly the same. And you get to obviously a lot of what we went through last year with the Browns. It's just reactionary, man. You're supposed to see what you see, and you're supposed to go towards it. And, hats on the ball. It's as simple as that. The phrase has been around the NFL forever. Put hats on the ball. It's not, okay, well, think, all right, sure, all right, then go get the ball. It's just not the way defense works. And I think they've got the ultimate, basically 180 reversal here, where they were going, the way they were last year with Joe Woods, to now a guy like Jim Schwartz, who has nothing but the utmost faith in him and tells them essentially, I don't think we have to do anything complex because I have faith in every one of you. And this is a guy that's only been here for a few months as far as actually knowing these players and seeing them on the field.
All right, before I let you go, this is from Sharp Football Analysis. Top 7 teams most likely to improve inside the red zone in 2023. They have the Ravens 1, Falcons 2, Packers number 3, Jaguars 4, the Browns number 5, Seahawks 6, and 49ers 7. Browns ranked 14th in offense outside the red zone, 20th inside the red zone in 2023. That surprises me. It says Watson just completed 8% of his passes that were thrown into the red zone, as a did you know. I would expect them to take a huge jump as well, and I think the offense being designed around his skill set will be one of the reasons why.
Well, the first thing, if he completed 8% of his passes, there's nowhere to go but up, obviously. But the other thing is, but we talked about this, and we've talked about this in the past, Jim, with the wide receiver room. They can go small and quick if they want. They can go Cooper, Moore, Grant, Goodwin, Schwartz, whatever one of these guys ends up actually making the roster, of course. You can go big. You can play Njoku as a slot. You can put Akers on the field. You can play Tillman. You can play Donovan Peoples-Jones. That gives you diversity. As far as, the tight ends, besides David Njoku, we understand the other 2 tight ends aren't that great at blockers. Well, that's great. We saw James Hudson do it last year. Guess what? You know what else they may be able to do this year? Is they might be able to use Dawand Jones as a red zone blocker as a tight end. So they have a lot of different ways they can go about this as far as peeling the apple. And it really, really should be fun because they're going to be able to do some things they haven't done in seasons past, just have a little bit more diversity as far as the skill talent they have. And, of course, DeShaun, obviously, there is going to be a world of turnaround. There's no way – I mean, if he goes less – if he goes less than 8% on his red zone passes last year, then we're having none of these conversations, obviously.
Jeff Lloyd, as always, appreciate the time and the insight. Thanks very much, Jeff.
All the best, Dave. Anytime you know that, buddy.
Jeff Lloyd, make sure you check him out. Good stuff. Locked On Browns podcast. We're going to step aside, take a quick timeout. Eric Mangini will talk a little bit about DeShaun Watson. Stay with us on Sports4CLE.
Come back to go forward. Back to learning new things. Back to pursuing your dreams. Tri-C has flexible learning options to fit your life. And every year, more than 1,000 local companies provide Tri-C students with real-world learning. The right education can boost your lifetime earning power by hundreds of thousands of dollars. Start now with a college education you can afford. Tri-C, where futures begin.
The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education program recognizes role model students and teachers from across Ohio. Nominations can now be done completely online. To nominate a deserving teacher or student, go to OhioLottery.com. In the About section, find Partners in Education. There you will find links to the nomination forms. Students kindergarten through 12th grade can be academic all-stars. Teachers can be honored as a Teacher of the Month. The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education, where stars shine.
I am powerful beyond my wildest imagination.
I will define my future.
I will keep challenging myself to improve.
Because I am a future leader of this great nation.
I will be responsible for raising a beautiful family.
And educating not only my generation, but many more to come.
I will make a difference in my community.
And I will stand up for what I believe in.
I will not settle for simply chasing my dreams. I will achieve them.
Because I was given a chance.
An opportunity.
A home.
At Family, Career, and Community Leaders of America.
The ultimate leadership experience.
FCCLA has been one of the greatest experiences of my life.
It's made me who I am today.
Join us. We'll build a new future together.
We continue talking Browns here on Sports4CLE. Former NFL head coach Eric Mangini on what he sees from DeShaun Watson entering the 2023 season. This from the 33rdteam.com.
The biggest storyline on offense for the Cleveland Browns is easily DeShaun Watson. And what's amazing to me is there's so much conversation about Aaron Rodgers, who's 39 years old, and Russell Wilson, who's 35 years old. and very little talk about DeShaun Watson, who's going to be 28 years old during the course of the season. And they're all really in the same bucket. They're all veteran quarterbacks that have had incredible success in the past and now are trying to get back to that form. And the great thing for DeShaun Watson is where he falls in this discussion. He's not really part of it, so he doesn't have the same pressure the other two guys have. And when you look at what he did his last year in Houston, his last time as a full-time starter, he had 112 quarterback rating. He had 33 touchdowns and 7 interceptions. He had a 70% completion rate, which are amazing numbers. And now he's 6 games with the Browns. He got to play through the system late in the season. He's had a full off season. He's a year removed from all of the off the field problems that he had, and he has limited expectations, which positions himself to be in the best spot of those 3 guys to make a huge jump.
With that, let's welcome in Tyler Johnson from the Faithful Dawgs Podcast, as well as Network 216. I agree with Eric Mangini. Everybody talks about Watson and Rodgers and Wilson. Watson's in the prime of his career. Both those other guys are on the other side of it. They may be good, but they're on the other side of their prime.
Yeah, I mean, very good quarterbacks, as you mentioned, but DeShaun Watson's only going to be 28 years old. And if we look back just at his previous stats when he was with the Texans, he was consistently proving that he was a top 10 quarterback in the NFL. And the only reason that last year he played so poorly, again, everything was against him. He was dealing with a lot off the field, of course. He was learning a brand new system. But also on top of that, the offense itself was trying to learn a new system right when DeShaun Watson was coming back to quarterback the offense. It was just a lot in that short amount of time. And keep in mind, DeShaun Watson not playing for nearly 2 years. Of course, he's going to be rusty in that situation. I think the one thing about Mangini, I would say, is that DeShaun Watson's expectations, he really does have to come out and perform. I agree, though, it's a little different than Rodgers and some of these other veteran quarterbacks. But, yeah, DeShaun Watson still has a lot of expectations on him. And I know that there's a lot of expectations for him to carry this Browns team to the playoffs, because ultimately, if that doesn't happen, that could be what ends up costing Kevin Stefanski his job if the Browns don't end up making the playoffs this year. Remains to be seen, but a lot of expectation on DeShaun Watson. But Eric Mangini makes a great point. No one talks about Watson, and I think that might be good that no one talks about him, because it just gives him that opportunity to prove people wrong.
Yeah, nationally, the expectations, as we've seen throughout it, much to the chagrin and anger of Browns fans, nationally nobody expects as much. Locally, everybody that looks at this expects this to be a playoff team that has a chance to win the division, I think. What about the starters? What do you think about them playing in the preseason? And we've, throughout the course of the show, we've kind of updated people on Jerome Ford. So there's boy, you got to get ready for week 1. Boy, you don't want a starter hurt in preseason.
Yeah, this is a huge talking point right now, because you have that group that is saying, I don't want any of the starters injured this preseason. And I understand it completely. There's also that group that this is a brand new offense. You have a brand new defensive coordinator in Jim Schwartz. You need to see these doesn't even necessarily have to be a quarter, a couple drives, just have to get their feet wet this preseason. That's where I'm at. I don't believe DeShaun Watson needs to play a half or anything like that, but I do think total this preseason needs to play a quarter to a quarter and a half. I mean, again, this is a brand new offensive system that Kevin Stefanski is implementing. These guys need to be playing. Nick Chubb, not so much, I don't think. I think Nick Chubb sitting out the preseason will be okay. Maybe even Myles Garrett too. But some of these other guys, I mean, they need time in the preseason. It doesn't have to be a lot, but I do think for DeShaun Watson, he needs to be playing at least a quarter. And I hope if he does end up playing on Friday, which I think the expectation is he will, I hope they give him a quarter, because he needs to knock some of that rust off. He only played 6 games last year. He needs to play a little bit in the preseason. There is a risk with that, of course, due to injury. But I also think when you're learning a new system like this, offense and defense, you need to have these guys playing so that they're ready to go week one.
Yeah, the risk-reward thing has to be weighed out without question. And the other thing, DeShaun Watson, by his own admission, said he won't know if the rust has been knocked off really until the regular season. Even preseason, it's not quite the same. Take a look at this. This is from Warren Sharp, best receiving corps in 2023. So it takes into account wide receivers and tight ends. Eagles, Bengals, 49ers, Seahawks, Dolphins, Vikings. You got the Bills at 8, Ravens, Jets. And then the Steelers ahead of the Browns, who are 16. So Browns in the middle of the pack. I think Amari Cooper is underrated, but middle of the pack is probably a fair assessment. A lot of young guys that, Elijah Moore hasn't really done what we expect him to do. DPJ is kind of still a younger guy. So I get that. I think middle of the pack is probably fair for wide receivers and tight ends.
Yeah, I would agree with that because you have Amari Cooper. He is the one, I would say, proven commodity, the guy that's gone over 1,000 yards pretty much every season of his career. So you have that proven. You look at Elijah Moore. We haven't seen a lot throughout his NFL career. A lot of that is due to the situation he dealt with the Jets last year. But if you look at his rookie stats at the end of the season, post absolutely insane numbers. But then you look at Dawand Jones, consistently progressed every year of his NFL career. And then you have Cedric Tillman, David Bell. They're both unproven. Marquise Goodwin. I mean, he's proven as far as an NFL receiver, but never been a guy that's put up insane numbers, and the Browns are hoping he'll be able to play this year. But then you look at David Njoku. David Njoku had a great year last year, but now he needs to take that to the next level. So, yeah, I think right where they're ranked is pretty fair. There are maybe a couple teams, like I could even put the Browns 12th or 13th on that list because there are a couple teams I disagree with. But for the most part, that does make a lot of sense, especially given the unproven wide receivers you have in Elijah Moore. Dawand Jones needs to take another step forward. And, of course, your rookie, Cedric Tillman. So a lot unproven on the wide receiver position, but there is a lot of talent there too.
Tyler Johnson from the Faithful Dawgs Podcast, as well as Network 216, and I'm going to step aside, take one more time out. Other side of the break, we'll hear from Bill Callahan, plus talk a little bit about the roster. Do the Browns need to bring in some veterans? Sports4CLE, be right back. Stay with us.
Come back to go forward. Back to learning new things. Back to pursuing your dreams. Tri-C has flexible learning options to fit your life. And every year, more than 1,000 local companies provide Tri-C students with real-world learning. The right education can boost your lifetime earning power by hundreds of thousands of dollars. Start now with a college education you can afford. Tri-C, where futures begin.
We continue talking Browns with Tyler Johnson from the Faithful Dawgs Podcast, as well as Network 216. Offensive line coach Bill Callahan talked about what the Browns need to see from Jedrick Wills moving forward.
Now, we want it to be more physical. We want it to be more, I would say, more consistent in terms of the finish. We like to see that finish become more violent, more physical. I think we're pushing that. We've had long conversations about that. And Jed, he's a great kid, and he takes constructive criticism well. He takes challenges well. So he's up for it. He wants to get better. He's shown that in the offseason. He's shown that in training camp. He's becoming a more consistent pass protector. We've added some things to his repertoire in terms of technique. So we're really hopeful. And I know that he's really challenged, to get better and improve because, there's some big things out there ahead of him.
And Tyler, again, you and I have talked about it. He gets beat up a little bit more by the fan base, and right now he's got to take that next step. He's got 2 years to do it, but we got to start seeing it.
Yeah, exactly. I will say it's really encouraging hearing Bill Callahan talk about Jed Wills that highly. I mean, that does encourage me as a fan. The reality is we're not there every single day. We're not in the building. We don't see the time that Jed Wills is putting in, the extra time he puts in, kind of like Bill Callahan has mentioned. But he does need to show that on the football field. I think the biggest thing for us as fans, we see some of those plays where it looks like Jed Wills is kind of given up on the play maybe a little bit too early, but there's also things we're not seeing too. And anytime your offensive line coach, especially one as respected as Bill Callahan, is saying these types of things about Jedrick Wills, you have to at least feel maybe a little bit better, a little bit encouraged that, you know what, maybe Jedrick Wills is going to turn a corner this season. It's really nice being able to hear that, but now we have to see that action implemented to the field.
Yeah, I would agree without question. All right, let me ask you this. So we've talked about, Jerome Ford, that hamstring injury. We've also talked about Wright injured, Isaiah Thomas injured. Those were guys that were going to kick inside. Do you think the Browns need to bring in a veteran running back, maybe a veteran defensive tackle? Who do you think they look at? Tell me. Running back, defensive tackle, both, and throw out a couple of names.
Yeah, so I think running back they might need to explore. I don't, just because the unfortunate thing is we don't know how severe Jerome Ford's injury is. I mean, it just happened today. So we know one thing, that they're not just going to make a panic signing. So some names that at least I would look at as far as being available, I do think, and it'll depend on price, but I do think this is the type of situation where the Browns could, and I'm saying could, explore a guy like Ezekiel Elliott. He's clearly not getting the money he wants. You could probably get him very cheap on a one-year contract, especially Jerome Ford's hamstring injury is serious. But some other names, J.D. McKissick, I really like him as that receiving type of back. But it's really going to come down to how severe is this injury, and that'll determine who the Browns potentially look at. I don't believe they're going to be in the market for Dalvin Cook, because I still think Dalvin Cook wants just too much money than what the Browns are looking at. But a guy like Ezekiel Elliott could make some sense just because he's clearly not getting the money he wants, and I think you could get him very cheap. But again, I'm not saying the Browns are going to go after Ezekiel Elliott. It's just a potential option. They could also look at a guy like Rex Burkhead, who has been around the NFL. He is a little bit older, but he has shown that he can contribute when given an opportunity. And then at defensive end, the Alex Wright and Isaiah Thomas news really made you worry a little bit, because now I didn't know if Isaiah Thomas was going to make this roster, but now that's really worrisome, especially with Alex Wright, because now you have Ogbo, you have Zadarius Smith, Myles Garrett, and Isaiah McGuire basically are defensive ends. I know they have Lonnie Phelps as a UDFA. Carlos Dunlap could make some sense. He's an older guy. Akeem Hicks, I know he's a defensive tackle, but he has played defensive end as well, so he brings a little bit of versatility there. Robert Quinn could make some sense. Again, these are older guys, but those are the types of veterans that we really have available right now. Trey Flowers could make some sense. Another guy I've pounded the table for months is Matthew Ioannidis, because he can play defensive tackle and defensive end. So there are a lot of veteran names to look at. I also think they could potentially look at some of those XFL free agents, because they've been bringing in a lot of guys for workouts. So, but Andrew Berry is going to have some tough decisions coming up, especially depending on what the severity is for Jerome Ford.
Tyler Johnson, Faithful Dawgs Podcast, as well as Network 216, as always. Appreciate the time and the insight. Thanks very much.
Anytime, Dave. Thank you.
Again, Tyler Johnson, check him out, Faithful Dawgs Podcast, Network 216. Before we go, over the weekend, a little bit of a fight for the Guardians with Jose Ramirez and Tim Anderson of the White Sox. So suspensions have been handed down. Ramirez suspended 3 games for his role in the altercation with Anderson. Anderson suspended 6 games. Terry Francona, Emmanuel Clase, Mike Sarbaugh each suspended 1 game, as was Pedro Grifol, the White Sox manager. Now, Francona and Clase will serve their suspension today, Sarbaugh tomorrow, and Jose Ramirez is appealing, so he will have that appeal heard before finding out if he gets it reduced or if he does, in fact, have to serve the 3 games. But Ramirez suspended 3 games appealing. Terry Francona a game, Emmanuel Clase a game. They'll serve it tonight. 6 games for Tim Anderson, who started the fight and ended up on the ground at the end of it. That'll do it for this edition of Sports for CLE. We will see you back here tomorrow at 4 o'clock. Have a great night, everybody. See you tomorrow at 4 on Sports for CLE.